Today is February 8th, 2023, and this is Sandra Lafferty Carlson. I'm here at the Tualatin Heritage Center with Mike Lofton, and we are going to interview and record the story of Loyce Martinazzi, whose roots go very deep in Tualatin. And so, Loyce, thank you for being here.
Welcome.
So, would you like to start telling about the roots of your family?
Okay, I was born in October 7th, 1934, on my great-grandfather Martinazzi's farm, and I grew up on my great-grandparents' Juergens farm. So, I'm a farm girl on both sides. Although my grandfather didn't start out being a farmer, he was born in Italy. Grandpa was born in Burma. His father, Enrico Martinazzi, was educated as a ship captain, and he joined the British Merchant Marine because he did not want to join to be drafted into the Italian Navy. So he went to Burma, was sent to Burma, and with the British Legion, and he married a woman there and had 2 children. And then in Burma there was a big uprising against the British, and he fled with his 2 children and his wife. We don't know where my dad said that she probably went back to Burma after Gibraltar. So anyway, my great-grandfather Henry, went back to Italy, and we have a really nice picture of his family about 1865. The women were wearing hoop skirts, and they were his grandmother. His mother was from a very wealthy family in Milan, and she was a countess. So Dad always said we were Romans and nobility. Well, for some reason, Henry came to America, settled first in Colorado, and then he sent for the 2 children, my grandfather Julius and his sister Teresa, and they came over to America with under the protection of a lodge, Mason.
Oh.
So anyway, then Henry and his 2 children came to Oregon in 1889. And that's the year the railroad right out there was instigated, and so I'm assuming they came to Tualatin on the railroad train. And they purchased land up off Sagart Road, and in 1890, there was a real, what happened in 1929?
Well, the Depression?
Yes. A lot of owners lost all their stock. Stock market crashed. That's what I'm trying to say. Stock market crashed, and there had been a lot of people who had purchased land in this area just to hold it, and so it was sold rather cheaply. And my great-grandfather purchased the land from a man named Jacobs, who later jumped off a building in Seattle and killed himself because they'd lost everything. So that's just kind of what happens in that type of thing. So anyway, then Henry passed away. He was rather mysteriously, and my grandfather then grew up in Tualatin, and James Thompson was asked to be his guardian. And so
that was Julius?
That was Julius.
Your grandfather?
My
Julius.
grandfather, yes. So my grandfather married Nettie Juergens, whose property was over there. So the Juergens came in 1869, and the Martinazzis came in 1889. And so my dad was born to Julius and Nettie, and they had 6 children, and 3 of them died at There was not the medical care there is now. Anyway, my dad and mom were married during the Depression of 1930, and mom was born in Montana, and she came out here when she was 16 with the whole family and settled in, first in Lake Grove, where she went to Tualatin High School with my dad, and then later they moved to Stafford, so she graduated from West Lynn. And mom and dad got married when they were older, 28, I think.
She was pretty independent.
Pardon me?
She was a pretty independent young woman.
She was. She edited. She graduated from West Lynn High School, and she edited the what is it? Annual. And we have a letter written to her from the principal saying it was the best book she'd seen, high school books. So she was a reporter, and she worked at many different places. She worked for the Oregon City Courier, she worked for the Oregonian and the Journal, and she worked down in somewhere along the coast. And so they met then again and at a dance, and they dated for quite a while. And one time he said, "Will you marry me?" And she says, "Ask me when you're sober." So the next day he drove his little car up to Stafford and proposed to her, and they were married in Hillsboro, and Bill and Toppy Reber were their attendants. So
your parents were Art
Martinazzi
and
Ann
Chapman.
And Chapman, yeah. My grandfather's name was Julius Caesar Martinazzi. I think it was Julius Caesar Augustus. So that tells me that his family is very interested in history. And well, anyway, there's a lot of stuff about the Martinazzi family. Chapmans were from Montana, originally from Missouri. And so mom grew up in a desolate place in northeastern Montana called Plentywood, and she says there was not plenty of wood, and it was kind of like the prairies, pretty barren. And then when she came to the Willamette Valley, she was very pleased. It was so beautiful here. So anyway, they got married, and first daughter was born, and it was Joanne. And then she got pregnant again, and I was born. And I was born at home. She went to the hospital with the first baby, and with Joanne, and they kept her there for 10 days, which they did in those days. And she was so weak, they kept her in bed, she was so weak that she could hardly walk when she got home. So the second time she decided to have the baby at home up on the Martinazzi farm. And so my great aunt Rose Castile, who was Nettie's sister, came. She was a midwife, and she tried to deliver me, but it wouldn't work, and so they had to call the local doctor from Tigard to deliver me.
That wasn't Pennington. That was.
Oh no, that was way before Pennington. Yeah, I was born in 1934. Okay. I can't remember his name. Rucker? No, not Dr. Rucker. Anyway, so then they proceeded to have 5 girls altogether, and they moved around a lot in their first years of marriage because they were poor. There were no jobs, and Dad had to kind of work for his father, and that wasn't working out real well. So he then down the road was the Minixmouth's farm on Sagart Road, right across from the old schoolhouse, and he milked cows there by hand. I had about 50 cows, 3 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Got $1 a day with a penny taken out for Social Security. Can you imagine? So then my great-grandfather had passed away, of course, and my grandmother had inherited her share of the Jurgens farm. And Emma, who was married a lad, she got the first strip. It went from Tualatin Road clear down to the river. Jurgens Lane on the river, and then my grandmother got the next strip. And so the lads lost their property. They got a loan. They planted a lot of trees, fruit trees, and grew strawberries, but they couldn't make the payments, and so they lost the property. And Nettie told my dad, "If you buy Emma's property, I'll give you mine." So that way he had 14 acres. And so we moved over there. They had moved a house. I mean, the lads were pretty sharp in some ways, and they had moved a house, I suppose with a horse and winch or something, you know, clear up from down by the cemetery up on the hill on Jurgens Road, the top part. And so that's where I grew up, and it was kind of a nice old house. Mother was always getting things done to it. It was built in 1880. In 1880, there was a really bad windstorm, kind of like the Columbus Day storm we talk about. And my dad said his grandfather told him that when it was really dark and they went to bed, no lights, you know. And when they got up, the trees were just laying like toothpicks on the ground. And so a lot of houses were built at that time from that lumber, from that storm. And the house was a substantial house. Mom, of course, like I said, you know, improved things. We got an indoor bathroom and water. They used to get water from a rain barrel, you know. And I remember my aunt was what do they call a dowser? Anyway, she had this stick, and she went around quite close to our house, and the stick pointed down, and she said right there, and they started digging, and they didn't dig very far before we saw the water. And then so they ran the pipe right into the cellar, and they had to pump in a cellar, so we had running water. And then we had a tank behind the wood stove, which the water was piped into, and when Mama had a fire in the stove, well, then it would heat the water. So anyway, I grew up on a farm, and Dad had cows, and grew hay and strawberries. And so we milked cows from the time we were about 10 years old, I think. At first, Dad would milk all the cows by hand, and we would go from the house was quite a ways from the barn, and so we kids would carry half a bucket of milk in each hand and go to the house, and Mom would separate the milk from the cream, and we sold cream to the dairy co-op. And then the skim milk, we'd walk back to the barn and feed it to the pigs. And that worked really good. And then we were about 10 years old, we girls started to milk, and I milked cows till the day I ran off and got married. Milked 4 cows night and morning with my sister Tony. And we used to sing in the barn. Tony and I, we sang a lot together. I was always a harmony singer, and she sang the melody. And then sometimes Dad would join us on some of the old songs, and that was really fun. If we'd milk slow, we'd sing the slow song, but if we sang a fast song along the adjacent Topeka and the Santa Fe, the cows' tails would just whip around. We always wore a bandana on our head because the cows' tails would switch around, and they sometimes had nasty stuff in them, so we always wore a bandana. So I went to Tualatin grade school. I think that second year it was opened in 1940, and I graduated in 1948, and then I decided to go to Sherwood High School. We could go to either Sherwood, Tigard, or West Lynn at that time, because Tualatin no longer had a high school, and then the district would pay the tuition. So for some reason, I went to Sherwood. It's a much smaller school. Anyway, to talk more about the farm, my dad and Mom raised strawberries, besides the cows, and what was I going to say? I am getting a little older. I'm 88 years old, and my memory is not my memory's pretty good about certain things. Other things I can't dig up, but it takes me a while. But we had a nice little farm, all girls, and so Dad would cut the hay. I think he hired somebody to cut the hay, because he didn't even, when I was a kid, he didn't even have a horse. Before that, I think he had a mule that would cut they had a mower, side delivery mower, and then rake the hay with a dump rake. And then we'd go out there, and Dad would show us how to shock hay, and it was fun. Right along the Tualatin Road, he had a really nice field of alfalfa. Dad was a very tidy farmer. Everything was real neat, and he just hated weeds. And so we kids would learn how to shock hay, and it was kind of fun. And he was always very kind to us and complimenting us. We get to the end of a row hoeing strawberries, and he says, "You want to rest? You want to take 5 minutes?" I don't know how you can do it. And so we just worked a little harder. And we had to work on the farm because he had no sons, and he was really fun to work with. And he took us down to the onion flats in Sherwood and stayed with us the first half day while we learned how to weed onions, Tony and me. Tony and I did most of the farm work. Joanne, the oldest girl, stayed in the house and had to keep house with Mom, which we would much prefer to be outside with Dad. The younger girls didn't do that much work. By the time Rochelle was in high school, they had a milking machine. Anyway, Tony and I weeded onions. I think Joanne went that first day too. And then for years we weeded onions for the onion growers, a lot of Italians in Sipol. And they always said that Martinazzi girls were good workers. So anyway, the things that had really influence on me, besides my mother and father, were this church, for one thing. This church used to be down by the railroad track, and now it's moved up here. The only church in town, the Methodist Church. And also 4-H. Kay and Clayton Nyberg had been very active in 4-H. I don't know if you know what 4-H is, but it's a group for youth that teaches you how to do things. They raise cattle and pigs and chickens. I think Avery and Harvey were the first people to start the 4-H program, and Avery would give kids 25 baby chicks to start his project. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Kay at the Christmas program, she came to the Christmas program and asked my mother if we girls could join her 4-H cooking and sewing club. And so Mom said we could, and Joanne wasn't interested or something. So anyway, we went to that, and Kay was just a fabulous person. She was just neat and tidy. Her house was just spotless. Her children were just spotless. And she was just really good to us. It was, it was giving us a side of life besides farming. Mm-hmm. She would, and I was really good at the cooking and not so good at the sewing. I remember the one time when we went to the fair, I was sitting in the back of our pickup making the buttonholes in my dress that I was going to be showing. Tony did really good. And then she taught us to do demonstrations at the fair. And that was really good for these farm kids, Mm-hmm. Taught us how to present ourselves in public, and we did quite well.
Was that the state fair, the county fair?
Washington County Fair.
County Fair.
Yes. And we would take our projects to the fair. I think the first was baking powder biscuits. I can't remember. I think so. And then we took cookies and other things, and I did very well. Showed a lot of things at the state fair. If you get first, or you get a blue ribbon at county fair, then you are allowed to go to state fair with your project. And so we did quite well in 4-H. It was just a wonderful thing for us. We were in the cooking and sewing clubs, and then we decided to join the livestock clubs. And my grandfather, Julius Martinazzi, had registered Jersey cows, and he gave Tony and me each a registered Jersey heifer, which we learned to groom very carefully, took very good care of. We had to put blankets on them to make their hide shiny. That was something we were taught to do, which Mom helped us make, and Dad had fancy halters made for the cows. And so we went to the fair, and they judged them on the form of the animal, and they also judged us on showmanship. Well, it was a large class, and I won second in showmanship, and I was really happy with that because I had trained my little heifer quite well, and she would move just like I wanted her to, and I dressed her a lot so she was shiny. So I was really proud about that. And the other thing that really affected my life and enriched my life was the Winona Grange. And I know that your grandparents belonged to the Grange, and yes. Our neighbors over on Juergens Road, they had said that the Grange had started a youth group. Now what happened was that in Tualatin back in 1948, there was nothing for kids to do. One school, one church. There was nothing for kids to do but get in trouble or work, like we kids worked in the fields a lot. And so our neighbor asked Mom and Dad, if Tony and I could join the Grange, the youth group. Because this guy, pardon me, can't remember his name now, he contacted Oregon State University, it was Oregon State College at that time, and asked if they could have a student come up and teach the youth group square dancing. And so they did, and kids joined. I mean, that was in 1948, and in 1952, by 1952, there were probably 60 or 80 kids square dancing on Saturday night. That was just miraculous.
Where was that?
At the Grange Hall.
At the Grange.
And the Grange Hall is still located. It was built in 1939 from lumber from some of the, like Pennington's farm. He cut trees down, and a lot of community got together and built the Grange Hall. The Grange was started in 1895, but they just rented different spaces, but then they decided they needed their own rental. And the dance hall was wonderful, nice maple floor, you know that. And it was so much fun for us kids. And another thing, we also, the Grange would teach us how to give the degrees. We had a degree team and a drill team. And Tony and I were very active in both of them. There was a boys quartet and a girls quartet, and Tony and I were in the quartet, the girls quartet, and we won first at the State Grange. It was really fun. It was the four M's, the two Milan girls and the two Martinazzi sisters. So Tony sang soprano, I sang alto, Kathleen sang tenor, and Dolores scooped up the bass. So we sang Tell Me Why, which was really sweet harmony, a kind of a barbershop harmony, and then Beulah Land, which is a kind of an old religious song. And we went first. And we played, lots of places. And the youth group then would go to other Granges who had youth group, and so we exchanged, went to dances and things. It was just a wonderful thing for my family. Funny that the other girls were into different things, I guess. But the 4-H and the Grange, Tony and I were very active in. Tony and I sang a lot at different times.
Music was a big part in your family, your extended family.
Yeah, it was. I think, Now my son, my oldest son, Robin, he plays all kinds of instruments, and his daughters are very, very musical. So yeah, I'm proud of that. Anyway, I went to Sherwood High School and graduated, and then I married Larry Lee, whose dad owns some property up on Borland Road. And Larry bought it from his dad. It had 40 acres. And Larry told me when we got married, we can rent an apartment somewhere, or we can live in the old house and save our money to build a new house. So naturally, I was careful with money, and so I said, yeah, we'll live in the old house. And it was pretty barren, no running water. And we lived there, and I had 5 children. And that was 1952 we got married, and in 1959 we moved into our new house with five children. It was one of the nicest houses in Tualatin at that time. So that's kind of the story of my life.
Dick Price?
Dick Price, yes. And he was mayor at that time, and he built a lot of buildings, yeah. It had a daylight basement and hardwood floors, and it was a very nice house, yeah. Took a long time, and it was pretty difficult living in the old house. At first we didn't have any running water, but then we got water piped in. But I'm kind of proud of myself that we didn't just go ahead and spend his wages on a rental house. We saved, and that was kind of the way I was brought up. Mm-hmm. Mom and Dad, of course, lived through the Depression and always said, never go into debt. Never borrow. So then when Larry wanted to borrow money to buy machinery, I said, oh, no, you can't. He showed me how you buy for an investment to produce. And we went up to Scott Machinery in Hillsborough, and he took home a hay baler on spec. And in 2 weeks he'd paid for it doing custom farm work. Because at that time, Earl Saggart was doing a lot of the custom farm work, but if Earl wanted to go fishing, he went. Or if he wanted to go hunting, at hunting season, he went, whether someone's hay was down or not. So Larry got all that business. Larry was smart. He was smart. And So then I-5, 205 went through our property. And when it did, some of our property on the back, 205 did quite a bit of change in the community. And the Christensens, who lived down at the end of Robbins Road, then what did they do? They sold their property. That was it. They sold their property, and they had a strawberry field back there. And so Larry and I rented the property, and we took over the strawberry field. Well, that was just great for me because I'd grown up on a strawberry farm, and so we did really well. And we had the old Marshall strawberries, which was just a wonderful, wonderful flavored berry, but it didn't ship well, and so the Northwest variety was brought in, and they didn't have near the flavor, but they were a firmer berry, and they stood up really well for shipping. But anyway, then the freeway took about 20 acres of our farm, our property, and with the money, we did three things. We bought a new 1969 Ford pickup. Never had a new car before. We bought the 40 acres up on 65th, which we call the Bishop Place, and we bought a Charolais bull. And Charolais was a French breed, completely different from the British breeds. British breeds are stocky, and they go to choice easily. They grade choice easily. Where the Charolais and Limousin and some of these other exotic breeds were long and lean. And the cross was just incredible. Our kids were in 4-H because I really stress 4-H in my kids' lives, and I was a 4-H leader, and Larry was too. And our kids' steers at the fair would win everything. They would brought your steers to the fair at a certain age, and at a certain time, and had them weighed, and then 40 days later, or how many? I think it was in April, and then the fair was in the end of August, and then they'd weigh them again, and our kids would win the rate of gain. Some of them gained 4 pounds a day. And that was we had Herefords and Angus crossed, which is a black baldy, and then we cross it to the Charolais. And sometime in there, we had a Jersey cow that we got bred in, and so our cows had a lot of milk. So it just meshed really well. Larry was smart. Mm-hmm. And the kids, it was really good for, especially Tim, Craig, and Andrea. They showed their steers, won champion and everything, and it was just really good for the kids. I want to say that before that, we there was a horse 4-H club in Tualatin, and when the freeway went through,
the I-5 or the 205?
I-5. The people that had run the horse 4-H club quit. They moved, and so we took over the horse 4-H club, Larry and me, and there were a couple of other people in the community, Rivera's and can't remember who else. And so we built a corral down by on Nyberg, down by the store, which is not there any longer. Mm-hmm. A big riding corral, and the kids from all over would come and ride their horses there and learn to do things, and oh gosh, it was so much fun. And then the county would have, the county horse 4-H group would have a fair, a special fair, and they had events for adults and children, and we took them all. I mean, I won High Point horsewoman, and on our horse, and because she was just a go-getter. You couldn't hardly hold her back. So we did the barrels and the racing and all sorts of stuff, and my kids won all sorts of stuff. And then
you're a family of winners.
well, yeah, and a 4-H teaches you that. Uh-huh. Do your best, make the best better. So 4-H was really an influence in our lives. Mm-hmm. So then Craig had taken. I'm sorry that I kind of stutter a little bit. I'm kind of bringing things back. But we had this big farm, and a couple of people. Well, one person gave us 2 horses to board. Well, they never paid us any board, and what they wanted to do was find a good place for the horses, and that was a good place. One of the horses was a kind of a cross between a Shetland pony and a thoroughbred, if you can imagine, but it was just a compact little pony horse, and it was so well trained, and Craig just took it to the fair and won everything. And Tim, there was a bigger horse, and Tim won a lot. So our kids, that was really good for the three of the kids. The girls, because Lila was in, my daughter was in cooking and sewing, and so she was good at that. But the younger girl, it seems like she always got the worst steer, and so I wanted to make her able to win the big things that the other kids did. So I taught her to do demonstrations that we had done, you know, as I had done as a child, and she was really good. One of them was, a steer is not all steak, and she had this big display about different things that you could get from a beef animal, including the hoofs and everything and like that. And she won first at county, first at state, and she went first at PI, the Pacific International. And so she was voted in to be the Charlotte Queen, or the Washington County, Oregon's Charlotte Queen, and she went back to Kansas City for she won second back there.
And that was Andrea.
Andrea, yeah. So that was all the kids were involved except Lila. She said that when she was 18, she kicked the cow shit off her heels and never looked back.
She became a lawyer, didn't she?
She became a lawyer, yeah.
So your children are Tim, Craig, Andrea, Lila, and
Robin.
Robin.
Yeah. So anyway, Larry and I planted strawberries then on a lot of our property, and raspberries and marionberries and boysenberries, and we had the largest U-pick berry farm on the side of Portland, and we did really well. People would come out and pick 100 pounds of strawberries and pay, I don't know, we started out at 10 cents a pound, and we got up to more. And we would sell a flat of strawberries, a commercial flat, for like $3. Now I think they're charging $30 or more. But I mean, people would be making jam and freezing berries. That's what they did in those days. And we made a lot of money. In fact, that was before credit cards. People would pay cash or check, and Larry would count the money at night. And this was 100, or this was 1,000. We all counted it. We made a lot of money.
Huh.
And
but
that
it was
was
all you pick, and you
all
didn't
you pick.
hire.
We did sell some to the cannery, but because we had so many berries, we couldn't do them all you pick. So we sold to a Portland Canning Company in Sherwood, who went defunct, and they owed us quite a bit of money. And then we took them down to Woodburn, to Smucker's. So yeah, we did all things. We hired all the local kids, and we treated them really well. And they can still talk to me about, you know, I said, was I a good berry boss? Yeah, you were fair. But it was good for me because I grew up on a berry farm. And my daughter Lila was a little more, she wasn't quite as agricultural as the other kids were. And she said when she was 16, Mom, I don't want to pick strawberries anymore. I said, I understand, but you need to get a job. So she went down to Sweetbriar Hotel and got a job as a maid. And
because the Sweetbriar that was on Nyberg Road.
On Nyberg Road, yeah, just across the overpass, yeah. So that was good, but I said, you need to get a job. Because I understand the 16-year-old, she was a little more delicate and refined than the rest of the kids were. So that worked out good. What else? Let's see. Karen, my friend, who I call Lois Lafke, she was my Sunday school teacher in this building. Upstairs, we called it the upper room.
Oh.
You know, the Methodists have a pamphlet that's called the upper room, so I still call it the upper room. She was my Sunday school teacher. And she went back to New York and did a lot of different things. She graduated from local college. Oh, how this got started is that my dad had lived in Tualatin all of his life, and he knew everybody, and he knew all the gossip, and he knew the history like I just can't believe it. I went to after my kids were in junior high or high school, I went to community college in the winter so that I could get some more education, and I took a lot of history and literature classes. And Karen came back from New York, and we got together, and we started talking. She and I would take long walks all around the Meridian Park Hospital had a big walking tour lane, and then we walked around Prosperity Park and we would talk about history. Dad would say, I mean, I kind of get these things a little mixed up, but out of order. But I would bring things home to Dad from community college. They had all kinds of records there. And I'd bring things home, and he was so interested. So, and this went on for quite a while. And he said to me, he looked right in the eyes, and he says, when you write your book, what? Don't forget the blowing up of the dam in 1906 and the 1916 double murder. Don't forget those things. And how I wish I had gone to the newspapers then and got him the copies of those brought back. He would just love to read that. But I didn't until after he passed away, and they was all over the newspapers. Well, he had told me a lot of things, and so I was talking to Karen about this, and she said, you know, we should start a historical society. Oh, no, we can't do it. Yes, we can. And so we did. I think that was in 1986. And so we would meet at the senior center, and gosh, we got a lot of people to join, old timers.
And you had events, you had programs with guest speakers.
Yes, and we had, the first few programs we had were outstanding. We had contacted all the old people that we could think of, even the Smiths from, had the sawmill that lived in Grants Pass, they came. The place was full. The senior center was full, and people brought their pictures and shared them with us. And then we had one on Lewis and Clark, and we had a famous Lewis and Clark expert come and talk. And with all these different programs, we served refreshments that dealt with the program theme. When we had the schools, we had peanut butter and jam sandwiches. When we had Lewis and Clark, we had filberts, and what was it that your dad, smelt, dried smelt. Yeah, and so, gee, we had it was just, well, I always credit Karen. I just kind of went along with it, but she was just brilliant.
Well, you had the stories.
I had the stories, that's right, I had the stories. And she knew, and then she said, you know, we should write a book. Oh, no, we can't do that. Well, you know, I had no confidence like she did, but she was pretty savvy. Yes, we can, she said. And we always said that I had the information, she knew how to organize that information, and that was just a dynamite conglomeration. Yeah, it was really good. So published our first book in 1984. And then the second one 10 years later, I believe. And anyway, then the third issue is now coming forward. And you know, and every time, every issue, there's mistakes. So we went through and checked things that we had that were not right. For one thing, we had said in our first book that the Nyberg house we talked about it a lot. It was a beautiful house, and the Nyberg sisters still lived there. Well, by the second printing, the Nyberg sisters had passed away, and the house had burned down. So things like that had to be corrected. So anyway,
and you did this long distance because by then, I think in the 90s, she was living in Southern California, and you were up here.
Yes.
And you didn't do this on computers or email.
Yeah, we had email. You know, forgot to say this, that in my home I had been collecting stuff from the time I went to college. And I had piles of information on railroads, bridges, schools, different things like that. And I didn't know what to do with it, but Karen did. And she took my research, and then we did more research together. And then she divided it into chapters, and that I could never have done that. But she had the brains to know how to put that together.
She had studied journalism.
She had
Writer.
a minor in journalism and a major in music. Yeah, so it was a proud day. You know, I had divorced then and lived over in Lake Oswego, and this company, I can't even remember what it was called now. They would stop out at my house and pick up each chapter as it was ready. I would kind of write the stories, send it down to Karen, and she would edit it. And we had some little arguments about that, but she was always right. I think I said this in some other thing too. So finally, she was able to mark what pictures should be used and what size, you know, and that was really good. So we got the book published, and it was very well accepted, and I was happy about that.
Yeah.
So if you get, other than that, my life, I got into music quite a bit after I left the farm. I missed the farm a lot because I've lived on a farm all my life. But I've now rented property up at Lusher Farms Community Garden, so I have a garden up there every year. I pull weeds too. And so anyway, I had played guitar and sung quite a bit, and my daughter and I used to sing at the Grange. They'd ask us to come and sing at the Grange, and at first she was okay. She sang the lead, and I was always a harmony singer, and I played my guitar. And sometimes she wouldn't want. Oh, Mom, I don't want to go. I don't want to do that. It's old people. I don't want to do that. Oh, come on. I said, I'll give you $10. She says, make it 20. So we sang quite a bit. It was fun. So then, after I left the farm, I started taking more guitar lessons, and I joined a bluegrass band. And that was really fun for me, really fun. We played a lot of different places, and I learned to play electric bass also, and I always sang harmony, but it was really fun. Played a lot of different places. Actually, I was in two different bands. One was an all-girl band called Blackberry Jam. I had started a women's jam at my farm store up on Borland Road, Lee Farms General Stores, farm store. And we had all these women around us. We were playing bluegrass music, and we said, let's start a band, a little band. And so we were looking for a name, and one girl looked up at my jams and jellies I had made. And she says, let's call it Blackberry Jam, and that's what it was. And we sang on the radio and a lot of different places at fairs and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And there was another bluegrass band called the D Street Band, and then Bluegrass Dilettantes. So I did that for a long time. I kind of miss it a little bit, but not a lot. The last few years I've been singing at the Tired American Legion, and but I don't do that anymore either. But it was fun. Music's always.
Do you sing at church?
Pardon me?
Do you sing at church because you're active in the Methodist Church still?
Yes, I'm still active in the Methodist Church. You bet.
Do you sing? Are you in the choir?
Yes, they don't have it so much as the choir now. It's kind of a praise band leader, so I don't sing in that. But I sang in the church choir since I was 13. Yeah, it was. I just loved it. I remember when I was a little bitty kid, standing right here singing some Christmas song. You know. Yeah, the church is. I'm the oldest, longest time member of the Fallen United Methodist Church.
Really? Oh.
Kind of proud of that.
Yes. Yeah. So you and Larry Lee divorced, and although you're still
Still
friends.
good friends, yeah.
And then you remarried. What year was that?
1996, I believe. Yeah, we've been married 25 years.
Okay, and that's to Norm.
That's
Parker.
Norm Parker, and we're very happily married, and we live in a house in Lake Grove. I wanted a house in Tualatin. I had a house in Lake Oswego, and he had a house in Tualatin, and we didn't want to live in either because I would have said, no, this is my house, and so we bought a house together. Yeah. But I'm in Tualatin a lot. I say that I sleep in Lake Oswego, but I live in Tualatin. Tualatin's my hometown, and I love it. You know, I don't know how long you want me to go on.
Well, what more do you have?
Not much, but I remember as a kid, in the late summer when hay was in and the berries were all picked and everything, Dad would take us down across the bottomland over to the river, and we would go swimming. And at one time there was a Jurgens Park down there, because that was Jurgens' property. And John Jurgens had a swim park. It was the first swim park on the river. And I can barely remember that there was a big sign up a kitty corner from the hospital, from the cemetery, that said Jurgens Park, and you go down there. But we went across the bottomland, and we would swim there. It was just a little dock, and there wasn't much. But there, he had then bought property up on Pacific Highway and started another Jurgens Park, and that was a log cabins, and he had a grocery store and a bar, a tavern, and a ball field, and then the third Jurgens Park is now along Jurgens Road and Hazelbrook. So I would say there's 3 Jurgens Parks in Tualatin.
Oh, was the second one on the river, was that Romer's Rest?
Romer's Rest was across the, yeah. Now the swim parks are really popular, especially Romer's Rest. And then there was one on the other, Avalon on the other side of the river, and there was one on Hazelbrook Road. I can't remember what the name is. I should remember it, but anyway, it was real cheap. And pay a dime to get in, where the others were like 25 cents or 75 cents. So some people Loyce, it was on Hazelbrook Road. So some people would pay the dime and then to get into Loyce, then swim across to Avalon.
Oh.
Get in there.
And didn't they have the swan boats? I mean,
there was a swan boat, yes, a swan boat that they would pedal, yeah. And they had canoes to rent out, yeah. And baseball teams and stuff. It was really fun thing, and people from Portland would come out and have picnics. Romer's Rest was just fantastic. From where we lived, we could either walk on the highway, Tualatin Road, or you can walk down what we call the lower road, Hazelbrook, to go to both of those. I remember. And then we catch the bus up at Jurgens Park. That was on the bus route to Jurgens Park, going to Portland.
Well, I bet you could tell a lot more stories.
Oh, I'm sure.
We're probably running out of time.
Yeah, probably running out of time, yes. That's enough for me.
Well, thank you so much, Loyce.
Well, you're welcome.
Sharing your story.
You're welcome. I love Tualatin.